All right, 2 o'clock, top of the hour. I think we're going to get started. I always like to give everybody an extra second or so just to get logged in. This is normally when I would do a little bit of reader's advisory small talk, see what everybody's been reading. But we're all after something bigger today. Today we're going to talk about new buildings, which is exciting in its own right, and opening day collections. And I've got a very impressive panel that I'm excited to introduce you to. I see my presenters are on mute, so let me get everybody ready. That's the new Zoom gaffe that we're all in fear of. Get everybody on. There we go. All right. So I'm going to start. If I'm doing Brady Bunch here, I'm going this direction. I'm going to start with Lisa Wells. Lisa is the Executive Director at Pioneer Library System in Oklahoma. Thank you for joining us, Lisa.
Hi, Andy. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Just want to let you know we're not able to start our video. I was getting ready
to
put something in the chat.
Well, thank you.
Sure.
Let's see. We'll work on getting that streamed while I make my way around here.
Happy to be here.
Thank you so much. I think we have jackets in common, at least from me in reality and you and your nice headshot. We're also joined today by Michelle Gorman, who's the Assistant Director of Public Services at Fort Worth Public Library in Texas, and Michael Gannon, who is the Chief Operating Officer for Support Services at Prince George's County Memorial Library System in Maryland. So hello to both of you. We are just double checking here, trying to get videos going and audio for everyone. If you could all bear with us for one moment. Should be started here in just a second. There we go. Looks like Michael, I think you may be successfully off mute at this point. Can you hear me all right, sir?
I can. I'm off mute. I just can't start my video.
Well, we're getting there.
Okay.
And let's see, Michelle, are you able to hear us over and out?
I can hear you. Can you guys hear me?
Terrific. Yes, I can hear you. Okay, so audio underway, video forthcoming. We're all at the mercy of this, right? This is the new normal in public libraries and on the vendor side as well. Well, while we wait for videos to appear and very special Zoom backdrops, I'm sure I went blank on purpose so that I could let my guests shine. I'll tell you who I am, besides the head in the box. My name is Andy Paluzian. I'm the Library Services Consultant for the Mid-Atlantic region for Broad Art Books Division. So I work with libraries, Maryland, Virginia, New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, all around. Michael, in fact, is one of my customers. Prior to starting with Broad Art about a year ago, I actually did work in public libraries. I worked for New Orleans Public Library as a part of their administrative team for 2 years. And prior to that, I was with Mid-Continent Public Libraries in Kansas City, Missouri for 8 years in 5 different roles. And for any of you who are in frontline library services joining us today, that does not sound unusual, I'm sure. One of my roles while I was with Mid-Continent was actually working on a new building, being part of an opening. And that was for the Woodneath Library Center back in 2013. And it was also my first experience with Broad Art. A wonderful one, in fact. So good they were able to lure me over. It's also why I vied for the opportunity to host this webinar today, because it is something I'm really enjoying. So before we jump in, hopefully with videos enabled for everyone, bit of housekeeping. Probably you've all figured this out, but you were muted upon entry if you were not a participant. Not because we do not love your dulcet tones. It's just very difficult for me to focus on more than one voice at a time. We do have a Q&A below. I see many of you have found that. Many people have had the chance to introduce themselves or say where they're coming from. So please feel free to make good use of that. We do have basically 4 sections for the webinar today that we're going to cover. This is a conversation. So we are going to cover the projects themselves, and I will flip over to PowerPoint so that you have the opportunity to have some visual aids for that conversation. Each of the 3 librarians with us, has a number of buildings to talk about, so we'll go through those in detail. We're going to talk about the timeline for those projects. Frequently, one of the most important considerations is how long do you have from concept to completion, and so we're going to go through that. We are going to talk about the help that they would have received from their vendors, maybe seeding some ideas for yourselves for your future projects. And then of course, hindsight. Hindsight is 2020, this is 2020. So we have to know everything that they learned, everything they wish they'd known and wish they'd planned for, but now know and can pass on to you. So with that in mind, I'm going to flip over to our PowerPoint, which will at least give everyone something interesting to look at besides my yap. All right. So I think some of you saw we were scrolling through. We had a great little video here with some photos from previous opening day collections. I'm gonna just switch over so you can see what everybody looks like. And Lisa, I think I'm gonna be starting with you. Lisa, again, is from the Pioneer Library System in Oklahoma. Lisa, why don't you tell us a little bit about the projects that you've worked on, the opening day collections? Maybe start with the one in front of us.
Okay, that's great, Andy. Thanks again to BroadArt for hosting the webinar and allowing Michelle and Michael and I to, talk about our experience and hopefully give you some hindsight and also build some excitement about any opening day collections that you have coming. The project that you see before you is our new Norman Public Library Central. It was our 4th opening day collection with BroadArt. It's an 80,000 square foot facility, and this particular library was a combined collection. So we had an existing collection and we interfiled in a new collection. Our other 3 opening day collections were all new locations. And those libraries ranged in square footage from about 6,500 square feet to this one, which is 80. We had a couple of in-betweens, a 12,500 and then a 20,000. And the collections ranged from 22,000 items to about 70,000 items that we added to Norman Public Library Central.
I like these conversation nooks that you've included, and I particularly like that artwork out front. It's beautiful to see so much of the modern design. How about the East Branch?
This is our Norman Public Library East. All of our Norman libraries, we had 3 new opening day collections in Norman and 1 in South Oklahoma City. Both our East project and our new Central Library, those were part of a $150 million quality of life package. And that was voted on by taxpayers in the fall of 2015. And our 2 libraries were first out of the box. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, Andy, when we talk about timeline. There's some kind of interesting nuggets of information there that hopefully will allow someone else not to think their project's going on forever. But East was a new build. It's 12,500 square feet. The artwork, both at East and Central, were actually part of that quality of life package. Each item on that ballot included 1% of construction cost for public art. So we're very happy with the public art that we have at these 2 new locations.
Who could blame you? Which brings us to Southwest Oklahoma City.
That was our first opening day collection, and the facility is just under 20,000 square feet. It's in a very affluent part of Oklahoma City, so the service area there, it's people are coming to the library not because they have to. They're not coming to the library because the library's free. And that was an interesting thing. We made some mistakes in selecting the collection here and really just in the design of the building. We started out with way more public computers than we needed because most everyone is coming to this library with their own device. So just some lessons learned about really knowing your community when you start planning these new libraries.
All right.
Another picture of East there, that's looking from the sort of northeast corner of the building. This is a meeting room at our South Oklahoma City location. We're doing a maker project here.
Looks like a pretty portable maker station. That's extremely cool.
And this is our administrative office, and it also has a small branch library in it. This is actually an old Borders bookstore. We really like to talk about the fact that the bookstore went out of business and the library bought the building, and now we occupy the administrative side of the building. We had administrative offices in 3 locations, and so we've combined our administrative offices back to the same under one roof, which is really exciting. And then we offered a small space. We're partners with our municipalities by state statute, and the municipality is responsible for the facility, the furniture, and the custodial and utilities. And then we come in basically as an operator. And we like to say we do everything that makes it a library. So this was kind of the first of the Norman libraries that we were able to offer. And I really think it precipitated that larger conversation for those other 2 libraries that happened just the last couple of years.
And you have a coffee shop.
We have a coffee shop, which depending on what day we talk about the coffee shop, I'll either say is a plus or a negative.
I've known several libraries that have tried, some that have been very successful, and some that find it to be good in concept, poor in overall execution situations. So I know the jury is still out on that.
It's a nice amenity. That's how we try to think about it.
I agree.
But the folks that came to those focus groups, they really wanted the library to look just like Borders did. So they liked the coffee shop and liked together at the coffee shop, and they thought the library should have a coffee shop.
Well, as someone who worked in a library with a coffee shop, I can tell you it was fantastic for my productivity and energy levels and terrible for my wallet. All right. Well, thank you very much. Michelle, I think we were going to talk about Golden Triangle a little bit next.
Great. Thank you, Andy. And thank you to Brodart for letting me be a part of this today. So the Golden Triangle Library I'm here to talk today for all of the directors and assistant directors out there. If it could go wrong, it went wrong with the Golden Triangle Library. And so what I want to talk about a little bit today is that to give you a little bit of a timeline on it and to remind you that, even though something passes in the bond, sometimes it may take 6 years to bring it to fruition. So this was actually a bond product in 2014. It's approximately 15,000 square foot facility. It has about 44,000 items in it. It has a creative lab. So we're not calling it a makerspace, but it is a place where you can come in and get messy and get dirty. And that's really what we're looking forward to with that. It had, for the Golden Triangle Library, probably the biggest thing for us is that we had a great plan. We got it passed in the bond. We started working on it in 2015, and with an expectation that we'd be opening this library in 2018. And I can tell you with great fanfare, we're going to be opening this library on Tuesday, the 18th, this coming Tuesday. So we're about 2 years behind. And again, if it could have gone wrong, it did. And so part of what I want to share today is talking about how when things don't go according to plan, when you have a set timeline and then you realize you have to throw it out and start over again repeatedly. And I want to talk about that. And I want to talk about how when they say go, when the button is pushed and it's time to go, how do you get back on track? How do you work with your vendor to make sure that you're going to be able to meet the deadlines? How do you get those doors open in a timely manner? Some of the pictures that you're looking at, there's a rendering of the building in finality, but this is during the construction phase and it looks like a completely done building. And so people for years were driving by this facility and seeing lights on, seeing windows in, and they just couldn't figure out why nothing was happening. And ultimately, we ended up having to fire the construction company. So just to know that not everything is a slam dunk, easy job. And so it was a really great experience, but my job is to really talk about, here's under construction. And as you can imagine, the community wandered by this for years. And so there was a lot of just communication about when was it going to happen? What was the holdup? And so again, I cannot tell you how thrilled we are to be opening this library on Tuesday.
And I know, Michelle, this is one of your favorite pictures.
Oh, it is. I absolutely love this picture.
Just in terms of the delivery, if you want to tell people what they're seeing here, I thought it was very interesting too.
No, this was great. So as you can imagine, when they finally said go, we had very little time to actually get our collection in place, to get them out of the boxes and onto the shelves. And so one of my favorite things that we had is something called a pallet key. And these are actually provided by Brodart. And what I think is really so great about a palette key is that it allowed us to know where all of the books were going to go. So every box is labeled with a color-coded label, and you have the palette key. And so when we had 23 pallets delivered, as you can imagine, there were more than 900 boxes of books. And we knew that we needed to get this done ideally within a couple of weeks. And so this palette key really allowed us to match the books with the POs, which was really important for tracking budgets. But also one of the other big things is that you may have multiple genres, multiple collections on one palette. And so as you guys know, one of the biggest things about an opening day collection is how are you going to pre-shelve or do a rough sort and then a final sort and get them on the shelves in a timely manner. And what this allowed us to do was to be clear on how many boxes on each pallet went to a specific collection. And so you didn't have to go back and reshelve when you found a missing box 3 days later. And so that was really incredibly helpful to us. And the other thing that I want to point out in this webinar, so when they asked me to do this, I thought, we've all done opening day collections or we're embarking on new opening day collections. What are some tips? And I think using that palette key to be able to figure out where boxes are going to go for the unpacking. But the other thing that I want to recommend, and this is courtesy of my team, my collection development manager and my technical services manager, who are brilliant. And if they're on this call, I want to tell them that I'm so proud of the work that they did. But they came up with a genius idea. If you could go, I don't know if you can go back, but the woman hold that picture right there is something we're calling a portable cart. And what my staff did is they put a podium on casters with a laptop, an RFID scanner, a RFID pad and a battery pack. And it's totally mobile. And so what we were able to do with these packs is set up individual stations. And through this, with 7 full-time staff and 5 part-time staff, we unboxed an entire collection of 44,000 materials in 7 business days. And I think
that is amazing.
Some of these tools that we were able to use, the palette key, and again, these portable devices. And if anybody's interested, I'm happy to share that with you, Andy, and you can push it out to the group. That portable battery pack, again, the thing that I think made this so incredibly useful is I asked, as an AD, you don't get to do a lot of unpacking boxes and doing opening day collections, but I specifically asked if I could show up one day and just help. I wanted to see the process from beginning to end. And they set me up with the portable podium. They showed me how it worked. And for 8 hours, I didn't have a single question of my team. They made it so clear and so easy for me to do the section that I was working on that I didn't have to keep going back and forth and asking for clarification. I had my setup. I knew exactly what was required of me, and I knew what my shelving unit was. And so again, I think honestly, we cut our time by half, I would say, in shelving out a collection, maybe even 2/3.
That is impressive. And I have, as I said earlier, I've done this too. And I have to tell you, Michelle, that your staff probably loved seeing you there and knowing that you were willing to get your hands dirty too, because this is a huge undertaking.
Well, it was it was a joy, and my team is truly extraordinary to have done this so quickly.
All right, you got one more if you want to tell us a little more about Revi Carey.
Okay, I would be thrilled to do that. So, you're looking at a rendering. This is concept art. This library has just started. This is Fort Worth Public Library's very first youth library. It will be catered towards 18 and under. There will be a parent and caregiver collection in it. It is very much the first of its kind. And the thing that we are most excited about Revi Carey, obviously there's a special focus on youth materials and parent caregiver materials. This library is going to be a destination. We're going to have more diverse materials in order to reflect the community that we're serving. We're going to add innovative collections in this library. And so this is a library that will be considered a sandbox for us. What can we try? What do we want to put out there? We're going to do some STEM kits and programming kits and technology that will be able to be checked out. But then we're looking at some other innovative ideas. Right now, our idea behind this is, again, it's in a predominantly lower socioeconomic status area of town. It is going to be the driver of economic development in this neighborhood. The community is so excited because, first of all, it's beautiful. It says to the community, you matter. This is meaningful. Come be a part of something. You belong here. And so that's incredibly important. And we want to be able, like I said, it's an economic driver. And so right now there's a lot of empty land around it. And we think that we're going to be having businesses come in and be a part of this and really build out this community. We're going to build a park next to it so that we can do extended programming outside in partnership with our Parks and Recreation Department. So again, the idea behind this library is simply to make sure that our community knows that they are valued, and we are, all of us are dealing with brand new scenarios, living in this era of pandemic and the COVID virus, and nobody knows what's going to happen next. And so with this library, we're being very flexible about what are we going to need. I think that virtual learning is going to be a need moving forward. I think that different types of collections. And so we really see this library as being one of the brand new reflections of where our community is going, where the country is going with the virus. Everything is changing. Reba Carey is going to be our first design that I think is going to reflect a number of these changes.
Well, it sounds very exciting. And it sounds like you and your team did a great job profiling that community and really being very thoughtful about your needs assessment. Can't wait to see that one open in the future.
Thank you.
And next, we're going to be hearing from Michael Gannon at Prince George's County Memorial Library. Michael, you want to tell us about the Laurel Branch?
Sure. Thanks for inviting me to be a panelist today. I always like to talk about our libraries. So our Laurel Library was built in 2016, opened in 2016. Like Michelle, it took a while to come to fruition. It replaced a 23,000 two-story 1967 monstrous brick block building that actually had a fallout shelter in the basement. So when they actually tore it down, it took quite a lot for the bulldozers to break through that masonry block. This library was designed to be an interactive learning destination. We wanted to include technology, the traditional materials, community space, and we wanted to do a real interactive learning destination for children. So all of our children's areas are themed discovery and then something. So the children's area in the Laurel Library is Discovery Island, and it's a dinosaur theme because dinosaur bones were found in Laurel. Nothing exciting. They would look like chicken bones, but I wanted real dinosaur bones. So in the children's area, there is a glass floor with dinosaur replica bones underneath of it. Right here, you can see it with the kids. It looks like when they were digging the foundation for the building, they found these dinosaur bones. And this is a Nanotyrannosaurus, which is considered either a separate species or a juvenile T-Rex. Also, there is a seating area that looks like a volcano. There are glowing velociraptor footprints that go through the whole entire children's area. A funny little anecdote about this glass floor. This is a actual structural floor. And when we were in there putting the books on the shelves, the staff were afraid to walk on it. And I kept saying, walk on it, it's a real floor. But nobody would walk on it. So when we had our ribbon cutting, we brought a class of children over from the local elementary school. And of course, the first thing they did was run in there and jump up and down on it. So luckily, nothing collapsed. This building won the American Institute of Architects, American Library Association Library Building Award in 2018. And it also won the AIA Maryland Chapter Public Building of the Year Award in 2018 as well. So we are very, very proud of this. Laurel is located in 4 different counties. So when we closed for the construction, we opened a small temporary site, but there were 3 other county libraries around us. And I was afraid that when we opened this library, nobody would come. But you know what they say, if you build it, they will come. And this now is our highest door count library in the system. This was our first 2-sided fireplace, which is incredibly popular. The public wants us to run it even in the summertime. This was an interesting hybrid opening day collection for us because since we had a temporary site, we were still sending new materials there, and there was a basic collection. But we wanted to add, all the new materials we wanted in an opening day collection. So we actually had to interfile the existing temporary sites collection in with the opening day collection. So the opening day collection was unpacked and shelved, and then we brought over the materials we wanted to keep from the temporary site. And we also did something that our selection staff calls shopping at other branches. So they went to other branches and pulled newer materials off the shelf there and interfiled it. This is our New Carrollton branch library. This was a renovation, not a complete build. It was renovated from a 1971 brutalist concrete building that actually looked like a Gulag, Soviet-era Gulag prison. And it was in the shape of a triangle. So the renovation then took the triangle and made it into a pyramid with this front piece. And since this was a completely, we completely got rid of the old collection because it was in very bad shape. We dispersed the materials that were still left to our other branches and then bought a brand new opening day collection for that. The theme for this children's area is Discovery Reef. So it has an underwater ocean theme. We actually have a large, very large saltwater tropical aquarium that the children find fascinating. Here I am. I actually do, we do what we call hard hat librarian tours of our new facilities. So here I am after the furniture was delivered.
That's my favorite picture, hands down.
I look very uncomfortable, like I hope nothing falls on me or I don't trip on anything. And then we have two other buildings in process. This is the Surratt's Clinton branch that is a renovation of a 1980s building, and we'll be having a brand new opening day collection. And then this is our new Hyattsville branch library that should be opening up in April. And this one has a temporary site, so we will be doing another one of our hybrid opening day collections where we will bring over that and mixing it in with the new collection. And to the right, you can see the Flying Saucer. The original building was built in '63, and it had, that Flying Saucer was actually the entrance. And when we did our community meetings for the new library, the only thing the community wanted to keep was the Flying Saucer. So we moved the Flying Saucer to the side into a reading garden.
You know, I wondered if that was in fact a flying saucer that I was seeing. I got so excited because that's how it you know, that's clearly what it appears as, and I thought I had to be reading that wrong.
Nope.
All right, well, thank you so much to all of you for taking me through that. I'm just gonna hop back in here for a second so we have something to glance at. We'll move back over to our photos to keep this a little interesting visually. But I did want to check and see if we've got any questions that have coming in or that have come in since we've been chatting. So it looks like, oh goodness, yeah, Michelle, you were talking about being prepared for anything, and anything bad that could happen would happen. We have one person who's commented that they're moving during the pandemic. There's a fun new layer. Originally end of summer were completions of construction. Now it's been pushed back until maybe October. And this particular librarian is thinking about having tours of small groups, maybe doing some curbside only just to get the public in. Any comments there? Any thoughts there you guys like to throw down? All right, so we'll move on. We'll move on from project to timeline. We had the opportunity to talk a little bit about some of these projects, projects past and projects still forthcoming, Michael, for Prince George's County. I'd like to talk to each of you about the timeline, just from concept to completion, how much time went into some of these projects. I know sometimes opening day collections, you have a 3 or 5 year, even longer window, and sometimes it's a lucky endowment and you have 9 months to get it done. So hopefully that context would be good as well. Lisa, we started with you before. Michelle, could I start with you this time?
Oh, absolutely. I'd be thrilled to talk about this. As I've already mentioned, we've been talking about Golden Triangle for a long time. So as I mentioned, so it was a 2014 bond. 2015 is when we really started working on the opening day collection, with the understanding that we'd have 2 or 3 years to get everything in line and really open on in 2018. So we actually broke ground in June of 2017. And then between 2017 and 2019 is when we faced just an extraordinary number of construction delays. Things like the foundation had to be re-poured. So, you know, these are big things. These weren't little things. These were big things. Eventually, we had to fire the construction company, and that kept postponing the library's completion. I can guarantee you that through all this the community had very strong opinions. And that is something that it's great. You know that they appreciate the library, they love the library, but they're frustrated just driving by and seeing this empty building. So in January 2020 is when we said to our collection development manager, let's move forward with ordering. It is really looking like this is going to happen. Again, January 2020. And I think everybody knows what happened in March 2020. So we were gangbusters. We were going to make it happen. And then the pandemic hit, which I literally got an email from my boss who said, I think this might be the world's way of saying Golden Triangle is never going to open. And we laugh, because if you don't laugh, you might cry. And ultimately, around March, we said, okay, we closed all of our locations to the public in March. And at that point, we were almost ready to open Golden Triangle. So again, it got pushed back. And then what happened is that right as we were leading up into June, we said, okay, now's the time. So we went back to Brodart. And let me just tell you, Brodart was amazing through all of this. Brodart actually stored all of our books off site for us for all of these years. I mentioned we started ordering books in 2015, and Brodart was our only book vendor for this project. So for 30,000 books, Brodart hung on to all of them free of charge. They continue to stay in communication with us. And so to me, I mention that because there's a lot of stress attached to an opening day collection. And then when everything goes wrong around construction, it's the last thing you want to worry about. And I think that was incredibly beneficial to us. But the other big thing that's important is that when we hit the button to say go, Brodart said, we're ready to go. And I think that was a really big deal. So on June 17th, they delivered 23 pallets, which was 912 boxes of books. As I mentioned before, the shelve out took 7 business days. And on August 18th, we opened to the public. And I'm going to put one more plug in. No, Brodart's been great. They
we by the way, paid Michelle $5 to say this. Thank you, Michelle.
Nobody paid me a thing. Nobody paid me a thing. We work with many vendors. I chose to do this webinar because we had such amazing customer service with Brodart. The other thing that I want to mention, and I actually emailed Brodart the day after this happened. They delivered 33,000 books to us. There was one book that was damaged. And that is extraordinary. So that is worth kudos. And it's just something I want to put out there because I think that as I was unpacking the boxes, it was obvious that they'd been packed with care. And again, this had been in the works for years. These books had been sitting in warehouses and you never would have known it. So that's just a plug, but really it's about just acknowledging that you need a good relationship with your vendor, whoever your vendor is. You need a good relationship with them and you need to be able to say to them, we have run into problems. What can we do? What are our options? And they need to be constant communication with your vendor because when it's time to go, it's time to go. And when it's time to pause, it's time to pause. You have very little control over that. And so my plug is there because I think that as directors, as administrators, you want to make sure your vendors are on your team.
Well, we thank you very much for that endorsement. Let's see, Michael, same question for you. Just in terms of timeline, if you want to talk about Laurel or New Carrollton in particular, how much time went into that and, kind of anything along the line that stood out to you, like maybe when you did staffing or, when the RFP went out for the collection, anything like that.
Sure. So I have never had a construction project come in on time, never. So, or even early. So I won't let our collection strategy department start the process until we have a signed contract for construction. And usually construction is 18 to 24 months. Just because I've been burned. Laurel was held up because of some unsuitable soil. The New Carrollton Library was held up for quite some time because we had, I feel for you, Michelle, we had a horrible contractor too that I would have liked to have fired, but the county wouldn't let me. So that lasted a long time. But the good thing was that Brodart did not charge us to store the collection. That was my fear, that because we had told them we told them several times with New Carrollton, we're ready for delivery next month. And then, we would get close and I would say, no, let's wait. And they were very patient with us because it took a while finally to get the collection, actually the building done and the collection delivered. So we did not hire any extra staffing did you mean staffing for the building or did you mean staffing for the actual selection? Andy, I'm sorry, I didn't
Um,
understand the question.
No, that's okay. It was kind of vague. Honestly, I kind of meant either. I can mention if it gives a bit of context. When I was involved in this, Midcontinent had hired a reader's advisory librarian about 9 months before opening day, just to work through the collection development list they were getting from the vendor, because selectors within collection development departments typically have the day-to-day work of selecting for the system that they still need to work through. So if there was anything like that, just a helpful tip to pass on to other people if they'd not already considered it.
No, our selection staff did their regular day-to-day ordering, and then they also help with the opening day. So we didn't hire anybody additional for assistance in that.
I think it is what it is. Sometimes the budget allows, and sometimes staff have to be the heroes of the moment. I hope they all got to enjoy that collection and they feel very personally attached to it.
They did a wonderful job. They did.
Terrific. And then anything with the timeline for your forthcoming projects? You have Surratt's, Clinton, and Hyattsville branch coming in 2021. Is anything there on the timeline that you want to mention?
Well, one of the things we did, because we were even though they're not going to be opening around the same time, we thought that it would be easier if we started the whole the opening day collection process for both of them at the same time, so that way they could share some of the lists. We could be, kind of not double the work. So even though Surratt's Clinton will be opening at least 6 months after Hyattsville, they're working on the opening day collections at the same time, just as a time saving measure.
Yeah, and I have to say, I asked that question knowing the answer, but partially because I wanted to brag on behalf of your staff as well. That's just a huge amount of work that they are working through right now, and those are both going to be fantastic projects. I can't wait to see them open. All right, so Lisa Wells, would you like to talk to us a little bit about the timelines for these various projects down at Pioneer? Not sure if you can hear me all right, Lisa. I was trying to bounce that your way. I don't know if perhaps you're on mute.
Sorry, Andy.
That's okay.
I was saying that timeline is such an interesting question. Our South Oklahoma City location, which was our first opening day collection with Brodart, really had been voted on by a bond many years before, but they sold the bonds off as they got closer to that particular project. So we had this period of time where we knew it was going to happen, but we didn't know when, because the city wasn't telling us when they were going to sell bonds for that project. So kind of the prep time, we didn't really do much prep because we didn't really have a timeline. The 3 libraries in Norman, it's interesting because in the early 2000s, we started talking about a new Norman library, doing all of our master planning and our community focus groups, and had a project ready to go on the ballot in 2008. And that project both was for a new Norman library and also to increase our millage figure from 4 mills to 6. And the millage increase passed, but the new library didn't. It failed by 250 votes. And we were devastated and quickly sort of went back to the drawing board and said that the community was saying that they wanted multiple branches rather than a big, 1 branch library. And we repackaged it and was just getting ready to go back when the economy took a downturn. So that project really sat on the back burner for many years. And then in 2013, we bought the Borders Bookstore, offered some space to the city of Norman for a West Side location, which I think then precipitated, the libraries being part of the quality of life package in 2015. So, timeline, it was just sort of very surreal to open Norman Central and to acknowledge that project was really 20 years in the making. And so I think it's one of those things from everything that we've said as panelists is just, don't give up, don't think that there's not a chance. And really the new libraries that we have in Norman now are so much better suited to what we need than any library that we would have built in 2008. So even though we were very devastated, you begin to realize that it really was a blessing in disguise, because the libraries we have now are far more flexible than anything we would have built in 2008.
That is excellent perspective. Very hard one too, I'm sure.
Yeah, in regarding staff, two of the four locations were all new staff. And so, we tried to make sure that we budgeted for a branch manager first and then to bring staff on to fully be ready when we open the doors. And regarding our selection staff, similar to Michael, our existing selectors continued their regular job and also selecting the opening day collections. But when I think about it, I think that we did hire new staff to do that. And I think the staff was Brodart, because that business partnership that we have with Brodart really brought to the table some experience and expertise in providing lists that made it easier for our selectors and really allowed us to not add personnel on the Pioneer side for these opening day collections.
Well, that was an excellent segue. Thank you. We didn't plan it, I swear, but I was going to say, our next topic is going to be about the help, which is really the help that you can get from your vendors. I know in terms of the services that we offer, project management, collection development assistance, cataloging, processing. We can store, we can coordinate delivery, and some of those things you've actually each already talked about. If we could just run through, if you did get some help in the cataloging and processing department, if you'd like to talk about that. Lisa, I know you just went, but I think I'm going to bounce that back to you.
Andy, we really didn't do much. I mean, and that's what my selectors and processing staff will say. Obviously, the selectors worked on the collection, but in terms of processing, we really let Brodart do all of that. In fact, we imported our records into our ILS in a checked-in status with the tags activated. And then when we opened, we just unshadowed that collection. So we didn't have to check it in. It was imported into our collection in a checked-in status. So that's a step that I think you can work with your ILS to see if there's a way to do that. We just shadowed it so the public couldn't see it. Definitely, those lessons learned that we'll talk about later on, definitely that was one of them. And I think the hardest thing when you're working on your opening day collection is to just really say what you need. And I think that that's something that we built upon with each opening day collection, is getting more to exactly what do we need it to be, and just to ask that question, well, can you do this? And obviously what we're wanting to do as, executive directors and COOs is we're wanting to limit the work that we're doing to that collection after it gets in our buildings. And I think that it really just is having those open conversations with your business partner and saying, this is what would be great. And then understanding that it may be some hybrid. But I think the key here is open conversation and open communication. And I wholeheartedly agree with Michelle that comes from having a great business relationship.
Well, again, that is wonderful to hear. And before I jump to the next panelist with the same question, just about, that cataloging and processing help that you would have received, we did get a question from a librarian in Utah. She works in technical services, and she had asked if she rather wondered if you thought she should check everything in from the vendors. And Lisa, I know you touched on this. You mentioned that everything came essentially ready to shelve with the RFID tag enabled. Michelle, Michael, did you have your items come in transit, as it were, needing to be checked in?
All right, here's a lesson learned. So we did it one time where it came in and everything was bulk changed to available. And we found a lot of issues. So after that, now we do the opposite of what Lisa does. So now everything is checked in. It comes into the catalog as unavailable, listed as unavailable and shadowed, and then it's checked in as it's put on the shelf. So one of the things that we have also done is I send our processing staff and cataloging staff so they can actually make changes right there in the branch if they have to. Sometimes they find that genre labels were wrong and they can fix it. That way they can fix it right away. But we did it with just importing everything and then bulk changing it to available. And then we decided we're going to go back and check everything in, because we do the same thing. Our selectors actually look at the lists and add things so that they can add local titles to the lists. But we actually have it already cataloged, already barcoded and covered. and even to the point where the genre stickers are put on them when they come out of the boxes. They're already genre stickered.
All right. And Michelle, any other thoughts on how the items come in or on the outsourcing of collection work, cataloging, processing, anything there that you'd like to mention?
Sure. Well, we did the selection ourselves. Our selection team did a really great job. And the reason we were able to do that, in the past, we've absolutely used our vendor to help us with selections. But for this one, we have a library that's not too far from this new library, but the growth in this area has been extraordinary, and we knew that we needed a new one. But we basically used the data from the library that's a couple of miles down the street. And so we had a pretty good idea of what this community was looking for. But BroDart did do all of our cataloging and processing for all of our books. So they all arrived totally shelf ready. And then for us, we did process the media in-house, and we may do things differently in the future on that one. So, but for us, we did do the checking in. As I mentioned, we had a system in place and have really figured out to streamline it and make it as quick as possible.
All right. Well, before we jump on to our last topic, there's another question from same librarian. She asks the panelists if you recommend an inventory of all of the items after they've been unpacked. Michelle, could we start with you again?
That is not even a question that I can answer. I'm like,
okay.
Literally my collection management she's going to be on, she's literally watching, and I'm pretty sure she's going to text me an answer. That's a good team right there. So I'll let you pass it to someone else.
Not a problem. Michael, how about you?
I'll tell you what we do when we have a hybrid collection. So we have a hybrid collection when we have a temporary site and we have to integrate those materials, and we inventory the materials that are in the temporary site, because they've come over from the original library, and who knows if those materials are still there. So we did do inventory that. We are doing an inventory of that, but we actually don't do an inventory of the new things. We just check them in, and that actually, to me, would seem like it would kind of work as an inventory, because the things that don't check, the things that, when you could do a record set of the things that aren't checked in and kind of see what isn't there from the original order. That's just off the top of my head.
No, I think that absolutely, goes towards answering this question. Lisa, did you have anything else you wanted to add on the topic of inventory?
No, I'll just say, similar to Michael, we did a big inventory project of our existing collection. And something that I had forgotten to mention that was fairly important to us, we had costed moving that collection, and the cost came in at almost $1 an item. So for the last fiscal year, with the new central library, which was the hybrid collection, we didn't buy any replacements unless it was on the hold ratio report. And instead we ordered those through BroDart on our opening day, because obviously we weren't going to have to pay $1 to BroDart to move them or deliver them. So that was a way for us to save some of those dollars. We did not inventory the new materials, and we're currently doing that now as part of our project that we're working on while we have staff in the building and not a lot of customers.
Well, and I know we're all kind of looking for those projects right now. All right, before we talk about hindsight, which is always my favorite part of these conversations, all the things that you learned, I do want to flip over and get a couple more questions. So bear with me here. Let's see. Another good question from Amy. She asked, just kind of in terms of the new items that you did bring in, did you do anything to make them stand out as new? Or did you put the books that were newest up front? Did you do any kind of merchandising within your collection?
Well,
I know sometimes with all new,
a collection that was a new collection. So obviously most of the new things were a part of a new book collection, but we didn't do any special merchandising just because they were new.
I recall when I was in the midst of this in Kansas City, obviously BroDart was our vendor, and they did handle the collection development, cataloging, processing, pretty much everything. And they were working in our ILS, our database. But there was a decision made right before we opened to unshadow the collection about a week before the grand opening ceremony. And I was one of the managers in that branch at the time, and we ended up, our very first pick list we pulled had 4,000 items. So I was thrilled to not have to worry about how to merchandise better or inventory the items I got from my vendor as a result of that.
And we actually said that we weren't going to run the pick list for at least a month after we opened. We don't do that. So we understand what it'll be. Because sometimes there's a lot of one-off titles on there that other branches don't have.
Well, that's always true. All right, so let's see, any other things? We had one other question, and it is about interfiling. I think you've all mentioned that you've done some level of this. You know, you've had some buildings where the collections were completely new and some collections where you did interfile. Any tips that you could bubble up or things to consider when you're thinking about interfiling materials you previously owned?
I'll just say remain flexible and know that it's a fluid project, because our plans were to shelve the new collection first and then interfile the old collection. And we had challenges with our project not being on time, but then we had other challenges of the shelving not arriving on time, and we had to continue to delay our opening day. And it turned out that we could move our existing collection, and we moved it first, which was not how we had planned for all those months to do it. But it worked out fine, and you just have to be flexible. Remember the end goal.
And I
That
think
should be the first rule of librarianship, be flexible.
right. And I think you have to be stern, because, you know, the staff want to bring everything over and interfile it with the new stuff from the temporary site. And I'm like, I only want it if it looks newish. Actually, you know, I had to go over and scan through, and we actually ended up pulling some things off the shelf, because my philosophy is if you're opening a brand new building, you don't want anything on the shelf to look old or ratty. So you have to be stern with the staff, because they want to bring everything over, but you can't allow all that.
Yeah, the public also expects that, Michael, don't you think?
Oh, yes. Because
Yeah.
I don't want to hear somebody say, this is a brand new building. Why is this old book sitting here?
Mm-hmm.
I went through that at New Orleans Public Library. They renovated their main library just about 2 years ago now. And it's a huge space right in the middle of downtown New Orleans. And they have a huge archival collection. They're one of the few basements in the city, a city that so frequently, unfortunately, is underwater. A basement is a rare thing. And staff really wanted to bring up treasures from the basement, you know, fill in old series, things like that, things that had been out of print. And the director at the time was wonderful, really took some initiative, and Michael said essentially the same thing. It's important to show the community what their support has purchased, a beautiful new building, a beautiful new collection.
So I'll chime in here and just give a little bit of feedback.
Sure.
For us, obviously Golden Triangle is a brand new collection, and Ruby Carey will be a brand new collection. But the last one that we did that was an interfiled collection, the advice that we basically, the experience that we had was take your new stuff and put it in first and find out how much room you have before you think about what old stuff you want to transfer. And so it was, just like Michael said, I think staff get attached to things. And so it's, once you have a new collection and you can see how good it looks, then you get a feel for, does this old book look like it fits with the new collection? And so I think that has helped us a lot.
All right, well, we've got a couple of other questions, and, you know, I never want to play stump the teacher. I realize your individual positions and how you function in your system. This may be a bit granular, but I'll throw it out there just in case. So we've had a librarian ask, barring problems, how far in advance should you start selecting? Is it longer if you're planning on using an existing collection, pieces of an existing collection, I assume, versus all new? So any thoughts there in terms of, you know, that potential interfile project and maybe just a timeline of how long in advance to start? I don't know if that's a bit granular for you, or if any of the three of you might be able to speak to that.
That's a bit of a whodunit question. I can just say it's going to depend on the staffing level that you have and the size of the collection that's coming in and the size of the collection that you have. I think everybody has to make it work for themselves. And for us, we started selecting the collection for Central at the same time we started selecting the collection for East. East was a fully new collection and was going to open. It opened about 14 months before Central did. So it took us about another 14 months to select the collection for Central based on that hybrid. But we also did that because we wanted to spread it over 2 fiscal years. So, you know, I mean, I think those kinds of questions, I would be happy to connect that person to someone on my staff who could say, this is how much staff we had, and this was the dollar amount, and this was the cost, and this is how we decided. But perfect. I think there's a lot of variables.
I agree. I agree. And I don't fault, I do not fault that person for having asked because I remember having similar questions. I think it bears a mention, if not a re-mention, that when we do wrap this up, we are going to be sending an email to everyone who registered, giving them an opportunity to get questions answered that we don't get to today, also giving them the opportunity to share this webinar if there are other people on their team. And then thank you, of course, to our panelists because it will give us a pathway to forward questions onto you and your team. Because I know we won't get to it all. Opening day collections, they're wonderful. Once the dust is settled and the petting zoo is put away and the building is open for regular use, but the lead up to it is just a big undertaking. I can say, if it's helpful, that when I was in this process, the system I worked for did hire a reader's advisory specialist to work through the list from the vendors for the project uniquely. That person was hired about 10 months before the collection and the building itself was open for public use. And the collection size, just to give a little more context, was about 50,000 items. And we did interfile 3 smaller collections. They were juvenile award collections and a storytelling collection. So in that case, at least given that size, I can tell you I worked in a system where someone was hired just for the project. Day to day, though, I do work with staff. Prince George's County Memorial Library System comes to mind because I know your team, Michael, and they're working through 2 right now in tandem in addition to their daily selecting work. So it can be done. It definitely takes all types and major initiative on anybody's part to get through this. Okay, so that brings us to our last theme before we check for questions one more time. And this one is my favorite. It is that hindsight 2020. So Michelle, I'd like to start with you because I know you have scads of hindsight, having lived through a real construction dilemma.
I do.
Yeah, tell us what advice you have.
Okay, so I gave this a lot of thought and talking with my team and what did we want to share? And I boiled it down to 3 basic things. So I think the first one is that you need continuity and planning. So you need clear roles. You need a vision for the project that everybody's involved in. Everybody needs to be clear about it and everybody needs to work towards the end of the goal. One of the big things is that oftentimes in projects that last multiple years, you have people who come and leave. And so, that sort of leads to my next one. You need the continuity and planning, but then you need communication. It has to be between all parties that are involved. Everybody who has a stake in this project being successful needs to be engaged from the very beginning in communication. This goes to all of your city partners, your construction team, or your county partners, or your architect, your vendors, and then everybody on staff needs to be on the same page. So you've got to have that continuity and planning. You've got to have communication, and the third one is compromise. So my 3 C's. With compromise, there are going to be issues that you're going to run into along the way, and everyone needs to understand the end game, which is a happy customer. And I think that's probably the single biggest thing that we have worked through, is to make sure that all of our vendors, all of our contractors understand that ultimately this project is about serving the community. And so we are always trying to think about that as our final product. And what I've learned in these kinds of projects is that not everybody's thinking about that. They're thinking about their piece. And oftentimes when you have a bunch of people who are only thinking about their piece, you lose continuity. And so again, it goes back to the beginning, making sure you understand what the vision is and what the final product is, and that along the way, everybody is kept in the know when it comes to where we're going, and even when it comes into roadblocks, that we're talking about that, and that everybody, that our vendor knows, our construction knows, our funding partners know. So that's probably the biggest one. Those are my sort of 3 C's, if you will. And then to go back to this idea of staying on top of I'm going to stay on top of the contractor, and what we've learned is that delays create problems on top of problems. So for us, our books went out of date before we even opened. So things like test guides, popular nonfiction, travel guides, the new shelf, and prices go up. So it's not just that the materials budget can shrink to other expenses, because that did happen to us. And I would love to answer Raleigh's question about that, but prices go up for materials, prices go up for construction. And if you've spent all your money, there are very limited ways to make your collection current. So we had to really get creative. So for our new books, we're actually using our McNaughton program in order to make sure that we have new books on the shelves. Because again, when we purchased our new books, when we thought we were ready to go, those books are 2 years out of date at this point. And then finally, pay attention to system changes. So if you have a project that's taking more time than you thought, and you made a change in your system to say move to a concept book collection, or to we're eliminating a middle zone collection. Well, those changes happened at the system level, but then we had to go back to our vendor. If we'd had time, our vendor could have made those changes for us. But now we had to do all of that in-house. We had to go in and make those changes. And so again, it's just paying attention to where you are in the timeline, what you need to get done, what changes you're making at the system level, and can your vendor assist you with those changes so that you don't have to do it all on the back end. And then finally, we lost 1,000 square feet of space in the construction process. Things get more expensive with time. And so you start thinking about what can we cut? When you cut 1,000 square feet of space, you lose shelving. When you lose shelving, you lose book space. And so again, It goes back to communication and continuity. So everything for me, those 3 C's.
I think that could be a TED Talk. I'd watch it.
Thank you.
I like how you organize that, and I really appreciate the answer to that question also. We had one come in about kind of budgeting and protecting the materials budget and how to get ahead of that. So that dovetailed very well right into it. Lisa, would you like to offer any advice, any hindsight you have from your mini projects?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I think first off, I would say if you haven't done an opening day collection before, reach out to someone who has. Our very first opening day, we found out that Denver was delivering an opening day collection. And at the time we spoke with our executive director and said, we'd really like to go experience it. So we went and actually experienced a day of opening day collection in Denver and learned a lot from that. Certainly, I think it helped our first delivery go much smoother than it would.
That's such a good idea.
You don't know what you don't know. And then, there's lots of technical things that are worth sharing. But I think what I really want to share is that you need to find some time to celebrate what you're doing. And when we opened our 3rd library, we kind of sat back afterwards and said, we didn't really celebrate this project the way we should have. And I think we took for granted a little bit that we were opening a new library and we were delivering a new collection. And so with Central, we tried to put some of that celebration back in and make sure that people are having fun and that they understand what you're bringing to the community. These new libraries are big endeavors and they deserve celebration. Your staff deserves the opportunity to celebrate all of the work that's gone into opening a new library and planning and just the hardship that comes with planning a new library and so many things, as Michelle and Michael have both mentioned, that are out of your control. And so I'll just say, be sure to celebrate what you're doing and the difference that you're making. Through one of the delays, I was so frustrated on a Sunday, I stopped by Central and, all the trades are supposed to be there because it's punch list. And I walk in and there's one guy with one tiny paintbrush and all I can see are all of the things that are not finished and not to standard. And I was so aggravated and just really down. And I left and was leaving the parking lot. And in my rearview mirror, I saw an older woman and a young girl walking to the library, and they were peering in the window and then going to the next window. And it just sort of tugged at my heartstrings. So I turned around and I went and asked the young girl, I said, what are you all, can I help you all? And she said, oh, we just are looking in the library and we're wondering when it's going to open. And I said, would you like a sneak peek? And she said, yes.
Aww.
We went in and we did a tour. And from that little girl's eyes, I realized that the day we opened that library to the community would not see all of the things that I was seeing that I knew were unfinished or not to standard. They were going to see the beautiful new library that we were opening in Central Norman. And so I will say, don't lose sight of the difference that you're making.
Wise words. And that will always be that little girl's library. Michael Gannon, any final thoughts, any advice you'd like to pass on?
Just to build on what Michelle said about communication, I think we always have a big meeting and pull in everybody from Brodart and everybody from our side and talk about our vision for the library, our vision for the collection, what it is that makes this library special, what makes this community special, so that when the profiling is done for the lists, the selectors on Brodart's end kind of understand what it is how we want to do this collection. And then our selection staff take a look at those lists and they add things that are missed. One of our selectors said that sometimes you have to check the list because you might get the second and third titles in a trilogy and you need to catch it because the first one is missing. So you want to make sure you add that to it. So I think that's important. The other thing that's important too is save a little bit of money for the end. Save a little bit of money in your project for the end, because there's always last minute expenses and there's also last minute titles you want to get. One of the things that happened with us at Laurel was the public conversion on the building, and it was like locust and checked everything out, but we had held some materials back and we ordered some more duplicates of things and put those, were able to, they had those stored in the back and they were able to put those out on the shelf.
I think that's a very smart tip. I've talked to several librarians around the country, and they all have these stories, the crucible that is opening day, which we're not even touching today. It's a wonderful event, and Lisa, what you said, it's great fanfare for the community, but the shelves do get absolutely cannibalized. And I've had some hilarious conversations with people where they've had book trucks full of board books hidden in a closet so that they can restock the Saturday after and still have something for the day after the festivities. Well, I think that we are just about out of time. So I'm going to just jump off of our beautiful PowerPoint so that I can say a proper goodbye. I'd like to thank my panelists, Michelle, Michael, Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing your advice. And to our participants who, wow, what a crowd. We must have a lot of building projects out there. Thank you for making time. I know that there are still questions, but as I said, we are going to be sending an email out shortly. And please do get in touch with us, because we would love to connect you to our panelists so that they can maybe get some more of that granular information for you. And as well, we're always available for questions. So thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon.